The Israeli army says it's investigating the conduct of some of its soldiers after a wounded Palestinian man was tied to the hood of a military vehicle during a raid in the occupied West Bank. The Israel Defense Forces confirmed the incident in Jenin after video of it circulated on social media.
The man strapped to the bonnet of this Israeli army vehicle barely moves. Witnesses in the Israeli military say he was injured during an arrest raid in Jenin, but that's where the corroboration stops. The Israeli Defense Forces say the man was a suspect wounded in an exchange of fire. His relatives paint a different picture.
Mujahid was here, Hashim was on the bed, and my uncle Majid. They opened the door and started shooting. We saw it with special forces. Mujahid got up and was about to run, but he was shot in the legs and in the hand.
The families say they repeatedly requested an ambulance for Mujahid Azmi, but none came.
We told them we wanted an ambulance for the wounded person in the room. They told us to bring him to them. We got him outside, and for about an hour or half an hour, we kept asking for an ambulance. Then we called one. 15 minutes later, 2 jeeps came, and they got him in here. They told us to turn around and not to look.
They put him on the hood of the jeep, and then we were told that they'd handed him over to the government hospital.
An Israeli military statement provided to the Reuters news agency said the individual was transferred to medics for treatment, but it didn't give an explanation for a glaring detail in the video: that the army vehicle drove past 2 ambulances without any apparent interaction. It's led to accusations Mujahid Azri was being used as a human shield. #human shielding in action. That's what the UN Special Rapporteur on the occupied Palestinian territories wrote on X, further accusing Israel of turning international law on its head. Israel frequently cites human shielding by Palestinian militants as a cause of the huge death toll in Gaza and for civilian casualties inflicted during its operations in the occupied West Bank. In its statement, the Israeli military said its soldiers had violated military protocol in Jenin and that it would investigate and deal with the incident.
Meanwhile, health officials in Gaza say at least 39 people have been killed by Israeli airstrikes in the north of the territory. Israel says its fighter jet struck 2 Hamas military sites in Gaza City. It's the latest deadly incident as Israel continues its campaign to crush the Palestinian militant group.
Some carry away the wounded, while others pick through the rubble, searching for survivors, after a residential block in Al-Shati was hit by a deadly strike. This is one of the oldest refugee camps in the Gaza Strip.
People were going about their business. Some were at home. All of a sudden, fighter jets just struck. The whole area was wiped out. High-rise buildings were reduced to rubble.
Eyewitnesses said the strike hit 2 neighborhoods and flattened several apartment buildings and nearby houses. Health officials in Gaza say they expect to find more bodies following Saturday's strikes on Gaza City.
The whole area was targeted. It was like an earthquake. As you see, homes were destroyed. There are still families under the rubble. Some of the injured were transferred to hospital, and now we're rescuing the others who were left under the rubble. The situation is tough due to the lack of tools and the lack of fuel for ambulances.
The Israeli military said its warplanes struck infrastructure used by the Palestinian militant group Hamas in the Gaza City area. Hamas led the October 7th terror attacks against Israel. Now, despite growing international pressure, Israel has vowed to continue its Gaza offensive until Hamas is wiped out.
We should mention tens of thousands of people have taken to the streets across Israel in one of the largest mass demonstrations yet against the government of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. As in Jerusalem, demonstrators in Tel Aviv demanded new elections and a deal for the release of hostages still being held by Hamas. It's the latest in a string of weekly protests in Israel against the government's handling of the war in Gaza. Let's get the latest from Tania Krämer in Jerusalem. Tania, that video has been released on social media. The Israeli army has confirmed the incident. What more do we know so far?
Well, as you said, this video has been widely circulated on social media, showing an injured Palestinian young man strapped to the hood of this military jeep. This happened nearby the northern town of Jenin in the occupied West Bank, as far as we understand. And the Israeli military said that the man was injured during a raid in this area and an exchange of fire. Now, according to the news agency Associated Press, the family had asked the army that they needed an ambulance, but instead the army had put him on the hood of the military jeep, strapped him there, and then drove away. He was later, we understand, transferred to a Palestinian ambulance and then taken to a hospital. The army also said in a statement, you quoted them, that the forces violated orders and procedures. There would be an investigation, but it's still to see what comes out of this investigation there. And that, of course, comes on the backdrop of also conflict in the occupied West Bank. We've seen a lot of military raids, arrest raids, and also settler violence in the occupied West Bank.
Tania, every weekend now seems to bring hundreds, if not more, Israelis onto the streets to protest against the Netanyahu government. This weekend was the biggest, according to organizers so far, and Netanyahu's government appears to have no effective rebuttal to them.
Well, I mean, the government doesn't seem to be too bothered by them as well. And we've been seeing, as you rightly said, the last Saturday night, this was one of the largest demonstrations now in Tel Aviv, but we also saw large numbers coming out to the streets in Jerusalem, but also across the country, across Israel. And this comes after a week of disruption, as some of the protest organizers have said. We've seen during the week, every other day, protests or blocking the roads in front of the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, as well. Now, after October 7, after the attacks, there was some sense of unity. There were protests and demonstrations to call for the release of the hostages in Gaza. Right now, there are over 100 hostages that remain captive in Gaza. But now we are seeing more and more also the anti-government protesters out in the streets, or they're combining forces in some cases. So yesterday, again, protesters called for the release of the hostages, for the government to come to an agreement that's on the table, but also for new elections. And this is what we have been seeing here, of course, in the past weeks. And that comes on the backdrop of an ongoing war, as we've seen in the report in Gaza, with airstrikes and bombardment continuing throughout Gaza, but also in Israel, heightened tensions in northern Israel in the cross-border attacks with Hezbollah in southern Lebanon.
Okay, Tania, that is Tania Krämer in Jerusalem. Many thanks.